board. And then if we're all good, I'll go ahead and get us started.
Sure.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm William Green. I'm here with another Orchid Chat with Stephen VKL and Dustin. And today we have our special guest all the way from Alberta, Canada. We've got Dustin from Here But Not. And Dustin is a very, very successful grower. He's got an Instagram channel full of beautiful plants that take two hands to carry, and also a very successful blog with just so much information. Dustin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me on. I'm pretty excited to chat with you guys.
Good. Glad to have you. So I guess just to kind of get to know you a little bit, what kind of orchids do you typically grow right now? I mean, from what I've seen, it looks like a lot of Fragmapedium, Phalaenopsis, some Paphiopedilums.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I try to stick to the ones that are generally more interesting in the breeding realm and also that do well for me. Phalaenopsis are obviously popularly available. Fragmapediums, just like I got a couple of them and they did really well. And so I got a few more and a few more. And then after that, I got into Paphiopedilums because I had tried them like 10 or 12 years ago and I killed all of them.
Oh no.
And so after I had better success with the Fragmapediums and kind of understood orchid care a little better, I came back to the Paphs and now here we are.
What kind of drew you to that group? Because I suppose where you are, you could grow pretty much anything you wanted. You could just adjust your conditions.
So I grow indoors and my humidity is terrible. Like it averages 20 to 30% during the day, and at night it goes up to maybe 50%. My bedroom area, which is like a second spot that I have orchids, is a little more humid. It goes up to about 60, 70% at night, and then average around 45 to 50 during the day. But with all of the plants that I was trying to grow, you kind of have selective pressure essentially, and the things that survive you keep, and the things that don't you kind of say goodbye to.
Right. Totally.
I cannot grow Cattleya. I don't know if it's related to water quality because I use tap water, which has a lot of minerals and alkalinity in it, or if it's temperature because our average temperatures are around 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, which I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's more mild. And Cattleya is just, I can't do them. There are people in Calgary that do grow Cattleya as well. So, but the point is, I've kind of ended up with the plants that performed really well for me, and because they're rewarding, I just got more into them.
Right. I've noticed.
I think that's, I was going to say, I think that's really important because so many people, especially when they're first getting into orchids, like they'll just grab everything, right? And they get so sad when something dies, or they're really spending a lot of time on some plants over here, and then these ones are working for them. And you know, as you kind of go through that orchid journey, you realize like what does well in your conditions, and then you kind of focus on those. And you know, the sooner people really like kind of hone in on what works for them, I think the more fun the hobby is, because there's fewer dead plants, you know. And then like once you do well with that group, maybe you kind of, you know, you cut your teeth and start moving towards other groups that might appreciate similar conditions.
Yeah, you bet. And sometimes it's just dumb luck too. Like I've got certain plants that in a group like jewel orchids, there's a lot, like I cannot grow an ectochilus very well. I think it's because they have seasonal periods, and when it comes to the seasonal periods, they always die out on me. But Ludicea, Macotes patola, grow those really well. And those are at room humidity, and everything you read online says not to do that. So I think I'm just lucky in that specific plant.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing when you're first getting into plants to just try a bunch of different stuff. That's definitely what I did. And then, yeah, there was, like you said, selective pressure. Some things were just struggling. And that's even the case now. You know, I moved from Kentucky, which is hot and humid, you know, to Colorado, which is cool and dry. And my collection has shifted drastically from Bulbophyllums and Paphs to Cattleyas, and it's okay.
Well, and I think that there's like, for me, I know that humidity is like often a big topic of focus for orchids, and I kind of think that low humidity has allowed me to grow certain plants that maybe suffer from things like crown rot more easily because the water just dries off faster. Like I top water everything. I have to because it gets the water to the base of the plant where new roots are growing. And if it's too dry there, then you get new roots aborting. But like when I post on Instagram about like top watering, some people get really mad about it because they're like, you're telling people and you're gonna kill their plants. And I'm like, well, I have a blog, so here's all of the like information. But at the same time, it's just I think that just because someone made a rule in one set of conditions doesn't make it a universal rule either.
Right.
That's true. And to the low humidity, I mean, you know, both of you guys are indoor growers with humidity issues, and then I'm, you know, here in summer growing outside in Texas, with where it gets down to 20% during the day, but then it bounces up to 80 or 90% at night. And one of the reasons I actually started my channel was to show people you can grow successfully under these really hot, really dry conditions during the day. And you know, back to William's point, yeah, you know, you do want to, when you're first starting out, you do want to grab everything that you can and figure out what works. And then, you know, maybe take the cultural advice or the hard and fast rules that are sort of standard, maybe with a little bit of grain of salt.
Right. What would you guys say to, you know, if humidity is an issue for one of our viewers, how can you compensate for that?
I think we can agree that you can't compensate by misting water on top of them like once a day or something, you know. I guess if you want to bump the humidity up, you can maybe create an enclosed space like the tent that you use, and then I've started using, or just get plants that are okay with low humidity.
Yeah, I struggle with that concept. When I first started, I had this like mini greenhouse and it did really well. And I had like orchids and nepenthes and all these like cool rare plants in there. And I went away on vacation and the seam on the side of it split and I lost all of the plants. Like they all died in over a course of 2 weeks, because when you go from like 90% humidity to 20% humidity, you're going to cook your plants literally in like 24 hours. And then I was like, okay, that was stupid of me, not going to do that again. So I tried a terrarium. It was like a 130-gallon terrarium, and I had it set up in my room, and I had it up with a watering pump that would run water up the back every hour for 15 minutes. And the whole thing just like thrived and looked great. And then the water pump shot and jammed up, and I couldn't get the watering cadence back, and I lost a bunch of the plants and mosses and stuff in there. So I kind of hit a point where I was like, if I'm going to do this well, I need to be the thing that is actively maintaining that consistency of care. And I don't think that everyone needs to do that. I mean, obviously people have greenhouses in their backyard, but for me, it's been about consistency of watering. Like, because it's so dry here, if the potting media goes dry, it's only a few more days until the roots are going bone dry. And if you have something like an Oncidium that's not tolerant of super bone dry roots, then that's not a good thing. And so I've gotten into a really consistent process of every single Saturday, I water all of my plants. And that's also another rule that people say not to do. Don't water on a schedule. But for the last 5 years, every weekend I'm watering my plants and they look pretty good. So
how long does that take? I mean,
it takes a long time.
Yeah, because I mean, we're just seeing like a little bit of your collection there, but I know your collection is big.
Yeah, I'm over 200 pots, but so it takes me probably 8 hours spread over the 2 days. Now, people are like, that's too much time. I'm like, well, I know it's too much time, but it's also too much time to own a blog and run an Instagram and like have 200 plants and then do breeding. It's a passion and a hobby. So I think that if your goal is to enjoy plants, you should try and like focus on growing them well, and then figure out what works in the time that you have available. And if it's not 200 plants, then that's okay too.
Yeah.
Do you take them? I'm sure this is all in your blog. Do you take them to the sink? Do you? Yep. Okay, each one is a sink. Water.
Because our tap water is alkaline, so about 150 to 250 parts per million calcium carbonate. So it's hard water, and that means every irrigation cycle, as the water drive, it leaves behind hard water deposits in your potting media. So if all you're ever doing is spraying and topping up the pot, then those over time build up, and then that starts to push your potting media pH up. And once you go past the pH of about 8.5, you start getting nutrient lockout pretty aggressively. And it's not that the pH is bad for the orchids. It's just about how it affects the nutrient transfer in the orchid roots. So for me, the watering at a sink is really important because I need to flush out old minerals and try and keep that potting media pH as low as possible. And then now I've gotten into pH adjustment, but I only do that every 4th watering now. I used to do it every watering, and I ran into issues the opposite way, so if potting media alkalinity builds up over time, and then you're always adding an acid, I'm pretty sure the acidity can build up over time as well. And so now what I try and do is err on slightly alkaline and then do a fertilizing with acidity, so they have access to the nutrients, and then it doesn't go either way too aggressively.
That's one of the big problems that I've had with the tent, is that I just refuse to take them all out and water them. So
Yeah.
I use a tank sprayer. I try to get the water to drench the pots and drip through, and just, but it's probably not as good as it would be if it was a good flush. How do you measure pH? And could you say that again about what pH is the best for nutrient uptake?
So when they do, so initially I didn't believe the pH was like really that big of a deal, because I was like, I live in the Rocky Mountains, our soil is alkaline, and there's plants everywhere. And I was like, so how is this a thing? But the more that I looked into it, I understood that certain plants that are adapted to grow in alkaline soils had adaptations to thrive in that. So they're reliant on calcium, they're not as reliant on iron, and so there's certain conditions that they require to do well. Can you repeat the question? I forgot the initial part.
I was just curious how you measure the pH and what your target pH is.
So my out of the tap, I'm about 7.9 pH, 7.5 to 7.9, depending on time of year. There's a lot of runoff from the mountains, then the pH goes down, obviously. I use just a pH meter. I also have a backup of litmus paper tabs, just to make sure that the pH meter is still in line, because they over time can kind of crap out on you. And so I try to, on my acidic feeding day, I go down to about 6, and that's like every 3 to 4 weeks ish, sometimes a little longer too.
Nice.
And to use for acidification of the water, I used to use pH down, and then I changed brands, and the second brand that I used just caused a lot of problems. It was causing the calcium to precipitate out in something, and the original brand that I was using wasn't doing that. And so then I was like, it ended up causing a lot of problems with my plants. So then I started experimenting with other acids. I tried vinegar, malic acid, citric acid.
Lemon juice, yeah.
And all of those in some capacity caused problems. So I was like, why am I like trying all of these different things when the first thing that I tried did really well for like over a year? So at this point, I'm back to pH down by General Hydroponics, which I think is a blend of phosphoric and citric acid, but without sugar. If you buy citric acid like on Amazon, it's for baking. And there is like a sugar component to that. And I think that that's what caused my initial problems. And I just couldn't find a version of that was really pure.
Is that the one with it's got like a red label?
It's an orange bottle.
An orange bottle.
Like the liquid is orange.
Yeah, because I've used that. Our water, tap water here is liquid rock as well. And when I was using tap water, I use rainwater now, but I was started with a citric acid type of thing that I bought from a hydroponic store, and it may have been that same one. I found it was pretty good.
Yeah, it might have been. The one that I used after that was like a local brand, and it was in a white bottle. And I was kicking myself for that for so long, because it caused like I lost a lot of my plants because of whatever was going on there.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because I'm chomping at the bit to find out about Fragmapedium Kavaca. First of all, the story about how you got this plant. I think you didn't even think that's what you were getting, right? It was a surprise.
Yeah, no, I was trying to get so it was from Equigenera, and what I had purchased was a Fragmapedium Fritz Schomburg, which is Kovachii by Bessier. And I think what happened, I don't think that it was like a mix-up of plants. I think it was an accidental self-pollination. In my other Fragmipedium, self-pollination is very common. Like if you splash flowers on the petals at all, if you splash water on the petals, self-pollination happens very easily.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so part of me thinks that they probably pollinated it with Bessier and then had a bit of water get in there, maybe from a rain or something. And there was maybe a mix of the parent pollen with Bessier. And so some of the seedlings probably bloomed out as Fritz Schomburg, and some of them maybe came out as kovachii, or it was just a mix up in shipping. I don't know.
Interesting. Is it possible that it just happened to take after more the kovachii parent, or are you pretty sure it's?
So I think if you look at it, there is like Bessie is a really small plant, and so you would see at least some influence in shape or structure or color, and there is nothing there's like at all like
Interesting.
And I posted online and had guys like Olaf Gruss take a look at it, and everyone was like, no, it's kovachii.
Cool.
So how are you growing this thing?
So it's behind me. Let me grab it, maybe. This might be if things fall over. Whoops.
Uh-oh, be careful. I see all the spikes on your Schilleriana back there. Like,
there we go. All right. So there are 2 plants in here, and then all that pH stuff that I was messing around with screwed up the roots on these. So I ended up repotting it in December, which was right near the time that it spikes. But there's also 2 plants in here because I ended up buying Fragmapedium seedling. And then I just put them together because I was like, the pot's already huge and I don't need to.
consolidating.
Care wise, it's pretty easy. Like what I consider to be easy. I use tap water on it. The potting media is mostly pumice, so it's over 50% inert material. You can also use leca or whatever. And then on the tap, or on the top of the potting media, I put grow cubes or sphagnum moss, just because Fragmapediums don't like dryness, right? Like they're adapted to an area that's like consistently wet, where it rains often, where there's a lot of groundwater trickle. And so they just don't have the adaptations that something like a Phalaenopsis does, that grows on the side of a tree where there's seasonal dryness, where the roots are like okay with that period of dryness. And so for that, they're in a rock substrate, always in a little bit of water at the bottom. And then when I water, I soak it down, and that top dressing of sphagnum and or grow cubes keeps the moisture level right at the base of the plant really high. And so you still have really good airflow in the lower layers where the roots are growing into, but at the top you have moisture so that new roots aren't aborting. And I know that works because on Bessier or Bessier hybrids that I've had, which do this, they're the same thing, but they lift, right? Like their new growths are out and above.
They grow up, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't get them to root properly unless I take those growths and stick them down in, and it has to be at a certain point when they're first like starting out. And then other than that, I use tap water on this one. I'm really not too aggressive with the pH adjustment on that one. I'm not as concerned. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Ed's Orchids in the UK. He once talked about organic potting or organic fertilizer, and I use that a lot with all of my Fragmapediums because they seem to be able to really like handle a heavy feeding.
Steve,
so,
I think your fertilizer, do you use an organic fertilizer?
Yeah, Jim's Purely Organic is sort of a slow release powder that is, I mean, it's in the name, it's organic,
yeah, and the stuff that I use it's a combination of rock dust, so it's like literally pulverized mountain rock. It's got insect frass. I also put some shrimp meal in there, and then blood meal. And blood meal is just like blood. And so it's got iron and predominantly nitrogen. And when I do the feeding with that, man, like, because I only do it a few times a year, and in the spring, as soon as it hits, they're like, and so.
So do you have like a water well?
Sorry?
Do you have like a water well underneath to hold
Like
that
a reservoir?
Yeah, a small one, but there's a tray that like catches water.
Oh, nice. Okay.
A tray for sushi.
And so Dustin, and the reason I ask is, you know Dimitri in France, right?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. He's setting up an ebb and flow thing today, actually. Cool. And he's going to throw a Fragmapedium Kavaca in there, and I showed him a link to Orchid Zone, I think the one that's owned by Jason Fisher, and they used to do ebb and flow system for their
video.
Kavaca. Yeah, exactly. It's a really cool video, and it just kind of shows that how wet that species really likes to be, and so.
Yeah, and the flushing is super smart. Like, so one of the things that I've always had a challenge with that group of plants is that people say they need really pure water. And so then the pendulum tends to swing in the opposite direction, and people are like, I only use rainwater or RO water. And I'm like, the problem with that specific genus or that group within the genus is that they come from the Andes Mountains, which in an area that used to be underwater during the Cretaceous period, where you had a lot of like calcium buildup, the same way that we are in North America, and why our groundwater is alkaline. And so I think that it comes down to pH. It could be calcium, but if you're using RO water that is not buffered and is easily influenced by organic acids, then your pH can go below like 6.5-ish pretty easily. And I think that really messes with whatever adaptations they have for nutrient absorption or what they need for like tissue growth. I don't know, but I think that specifically with Kavaca, a lot of people struggle and get like Erwinia and rots. And I think that the reason out of that is because they're not using something that buffers the pH and prevents extreme acidity.
I think like you just gave me something to try. Sorry, Stephen.
I was gonna say, it sounds like that works perfectly with your tap water.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly, I think it's dumb luck. And I think that's the only reason I really do that well with them. And it's the same with the paths. They come from really similar conditions. And I also do well with Ludicea discolor. And I was like, why? Like of all of these. And then someone posted a photo of Ludicea discolor in situ growing on limestone with this huge bush, just like stuck to a rock wall. And I was like, well, that makes sense now too.
That's great. Maybe the reason why my paths aren't doing so great is because I'm doing what I said I was doing earlier, which is not really taking them and flushing them very well, just kind of watering from the top, letting them drip a little bit, but not getting a really good flush.
Yeah. I would probably say that that's an easy way to start that, because otherwise you get that buildup of acidity and organic material and stuff in there. And like, let me grab one of the other pots.
Now, Steve, you don't have that problem because you water with a hose.
I water with a hose. I've got a 2,500 gallon rainwater catchment. So I just hit everything with a hose.
Oh,
yeah. So the calcium buildup issue isn't a thing for me.
Yeah.
So this is a pot of seedlings, Fragmapedium Pink Panther by self. And when I deflast these, it was too early. They were like less than an inch long in the leaves. And everyone online was like, you deflast way too early, they're gonna die, like it's not good. And from my perspective, if you can apply like really targeted good care early on for something as small as a seedling, then it's gotta be pretty good for the adults as well. And with these, I should have repotted them ages ago. Like there's
they look like they're doing okay. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, they look all right.
All right.
Yeah, so I think that the pH thing, it's either pH or calcium. I don't know what the specific thing is. I haven't been able to like run a full experiment. I would love to. If I had more space, I would like run one with calcium, one with a granite, one with RO, one with rainwater, and just see what happened.
You need a lab.
I know. I need a lab and a big house. And
we need to GoFundMe for Dustin to get a lab going.
And actually, that makes me ask the question. Are you going to keep growing in those conditions for the foreseeable future? Or do you think you'll get a greenhouse, or what are your plans?
So when we talk about, like when I talked about the enclosure thing and terrariums, it has made me very hesitant to ever want to have a greenhouse. It gets so cold here in Canada. Like we're down to -35 in the coldest days of winter around December. And I hear every now and then there's someone posts online, oh, my heater kicked out and I killed everything.
Lost everything.
And I've done that twice now, and I just don't have an interest in ever doing that again. So if anything, I might try and get like a specific room where I set up like an ebb and flow thing, or irrigation on a timer where I'm a little bit more like careful about watching how those things operate. But I don't think that I'll ever do a greenhouse. Maybe like a solarium on the side of a house or something. But
yeah. And I mean, I've seen, sorry, real quick, just before we move on, the Bernie Butts over there in Toronto, he's got all his catasetums in his basement.
Yeah, and they're amazing. He's got, it's insane. His setup's crazy. And he does flasking just using like a microwave and like PEVP or whatever it's called containers.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's a good transition, because the last thing that I wanted to talk about were breeding, because I think at this point, myself, Stephen, Dustin, all of us are breeding our plants to some extent, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess, you know, you obviously you've got some crosses that you've registered already. And I guess my question is, do you have breeding goals? Were they all just kind of, let's see what happens? Or are you really kind of thinking of, all right, I'm going to push Fragmapedium in this way?
That's like such a good question, because when initially when I would post stuff, people were like, what's your plan? And I'm like, initially it was just to learn, right? Like how do you do this? And then I'll get serious about it. And then the more that I thought about it, I have a bit of a personal gripe or issue with award pursuit plants, because it tends to homogenize the efforts of breeders. And if you look at like dog and cat breeds, we have all of these like neat, wild differences from a single species. But in orchids, like Phalaenopsis, everything's kind of been bred to look the same: big, round, long-lasting, bright colored flowers. Same for paphs. Like it got to the point where you have like a bulldog Paphiopedilum, which is just like a mashup of all the species, and it's a big round, and it's amazing when you see it. You're like I've never realized how big bulldog paph flowers are. You see one, like they're insane. But for the breeding efforts with me, I was like, well, I want to see, first of all, what sort of things can you even come up with? And now that I've kind of, been working with flowers, seeing what sort of things show up, my interest is more about like making an unusual cross, seeing what comes out of it, and then pursuing that, rather than like making a plan at the beginning. One of the hybrids I made is using that Schilleriana behind me, and all of the leaves, you probably can't see them very well.
Oh yeah, they got spots.
Yeah, they got spots. They're silver. Some of them are like a dark purple, red color. And for me, I was like, man, that is, first of all, you don't see that very often. Second of all, I'm like, well, what happens if I took two siblings that have super dark red, purplish leaves and cross those onto each other? Like, would you get darker leaves? Would you just bring the modeling back? And so for me, it's more about like playing with it. I'm not as concerned about winning awards. For Fragmapediums, the one thing that I don't like about breeding them is that the species are largely different, and so they have a lot of chromosome count differences. And I think that leads to a lot of sterility barriers, which is why you don't see a lot of complex frags.
Oh, interesting. No bulldog frags.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So my interest there is more to just see if I can come up with something that maybe has traits of kovachii in terms of size, but on a smaller plant that, in different colors. And like, so this is another hybrid that I grew, which you can see.
Oh, that's a nice size.
Influenced by Bessier. Yeah, it's a good size. And this has a little bit of kovachii in it, not a lot. But it's been good, and I think that it's interesting to see how they grow, because when you're growing a lot of seedlings, like a group of seedlings, you see pretty quickly what works in terms of culture and application of culture, and what doesn't. Because if it doesn't work, they die like really quickly.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm really curious about you showed the compote of the Schilleriana cross, and a few of those had dark red leaves.
Yeah.
And the leaf color is sort of at least in Cattleyas, I know it's sort of a hint of what the flowers will eventually look like. Do you have any idea? Yeah, because like the darker leaves typically mean there's more pigment, and then that often leads to a darker flower.
Man, really everything's getting washed out. So far, this is the only one that's bloomed. It's very pale, but the leaves on that one are also the lightest compared to the rest of them.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, if you end up with red pigment in the flower, typically you have better colors, or like a better like spread of color. But I don't know. There's a bunch of them in spike right now, but the buds are still developing. So I'll probably know more. Is that
an alba?
No, it looks like it because of the light, but it's actually got like a fuchsia pink color.
Oh yeah, it looks white on screen.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It is, yeah.
It's really heavily influenced by Schilleriana, and it's fine. It's super fragrant, which is nice too. I'm excited to see how some of those siblings bloom out and how they grow as they get bigger as well.
Let's see, I think a couple years ago you had a compote of frag seedlings and one of those was variegated.
Yeah.
Did it hold on to that?
So it did. I don't know if I can get that.
Sorry, I just, things just occur to me and I didn't give you a chance to prepare.
No, it's all good. I figured that would come up in question. So it's still in here. It is now a big compote. It's not aggressively variegated. And I think the way that, like, from what I understand now about variegation, it probably isn't stable.
Like
because
it'll
it
grow out of
started
it.
with a half and half, and as the newer leaves grow out, it's less and less. So what I'm waiting for at this point is to see if the basal growths or side growths pick it up, because that specific growth, as it's gotten bigger, has really like lost most of it. Like in the newest leaf, there's none, and then in the older ones, it's like 50-50. So I'm not sure how it's gonna go. What kind of like made me sad about that though is it ended up being just an accidental selfing. I had thought it was a hybrid. I tried to make a hybrid, and it must have just been water splashed across the like thing. And so it's just a Fragmapedium rothianum, which is like a natural hybrid between Heritiae and longifolium. Longifolium is a really big plant. Like the parent is over in the corner.
Oh yeah,
behind me, and I'm
It's
just like,
it's huge.
now I have more. Like I don't need that. So we'll see, but it is still variegated. I'm just waiting to see what happens on those side growths.
That's interesting. I'm breeding, one Cattleya species, and I have been really been interesting to see what came out of one seed pod, and now my goal is I just want bigger flowers, and I might actually be inclined to breed for fragrance too, because I do love fragrance, and if something seems, one of them seems a little bit more powerful, I definitely would want that to be part of it as well.
I think fragrance is so cool to pursue, because it's especially with some of the less common plants. Like I don't think that they've traditionally pursued that in breeding efforts.
I don't think so
because it's a
either.
lot more work, right? Like you got to grow a bunch of plants out, smell each one of them, and then have some sort of like marking system to know which one actually smells the strongest. But super cool.
And everybody's nose is different, right? So like maybe if you're breeding for fragrance, might not be appreciated quite as much by someone else. And I guess the same thing happens with the colors, maybe or the shape. Everybody has their own preference for color and shape of flower, but I never thought about it for scent. That's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, if something has a vanilla scent and something has a Coca-Cola scent, do you end up with vanilla Coca-Cola, or does it come out totally different?
That's sweet. The other thing that's nice about breeding is that you end up with just really unique and extreme differences between the plants. Like I did, these are all Ludicea disc color. I suppose the light's not going to work.
Looks like some are really light and some are really dark.
Yeah, there's some that are even like yellow, which I thought they would just die off, but they're not dead. They're still growing. And so stuff like that I think is super cool, because then you take two of the light ones. What happens if you breed them? Like they're probably alba, I would assume, given what we've seen in them before, but I don't know, because the colors of the green is different depending on the individual plant too.
What's the turnaround for, let's say day one is pollination of a Fragmapedium. What's the turnaround for seeing that first seedling bloom? How long does that take?
So frags are super fast,
really
shockingly fast compared to what I heard about Paphiopedilums, right? Because paths take like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on like what species you're going. Frags, the seed pod matures in 90 days for most of them, which is about half the time of like Phalaenopsis and Cattleya and all those other ones. And then I've had my first flask frags bloomed within a year and a half after sowing seed.
Jeez. Yeah, meanwhile, I'm like maybe 7 years from now, I'll see my first Cattleya.
Yeah, and I think that part of that's probably really dialing in culture and having I grow them under a lot of light, and I give them organic fertilizer. Other people have been like, there's no way that you bloom them that quickly, and I'm like, well, I'm not lying about it. So
it's possible. Well, like you said, it's all about choosing a few plants that you're good at or that like your conditions and taking care of them.
Yeah,
Right?
totally,
Like,
totally.
all right, these are good lessons. These are good lessons. It's a good wake up call for me, because when I have plants like, you know, like this little path, and I'm like, I love this path. Oh well, see you next month. You know, it's like, maybe a little bit more attention is required.
Yeah, and I mean, with I go through my own bumps and stuff too, but I think that like having that connection, especially on a weekly basis, like I take a look at each one and I'm like, how you doing? And for the most part, they look pretty much the same. Spring is exciting because you get a bunch of new root growth and offshoots and stuff. But like, if you know Bill Thompson, the guy that grows bulbophyllums,
Yeah.
he was always like the powers of intuition, poo, blah. I think it's hilarious, but it's true. Like if you, it's small changes that you notice in a plant, and because orchids grow so slowly, I think it's hard for some people to recognize those changes early on, or to not make assumptions that early changes are doing amazing things, because
Right.
it could take 6 months or a year before you really see the effect of something like changing pH or adding something to your potting media.
Right. And sometimes if you see a quick change, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Dustin, it has been a really awesome conversation. Just hearing where you're coming from and just seeing all the success. There's so much more to talk about, but I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up for today. Stephen, did you have any additional questions or comments or?
No, this was cool. It's I don't have a whole lot of frags or Ludicia or fowl, so I think chatting with folks who do it makes me want to grow more, which is probably a bad thing. But yeah, this is great.
Really inspiring. Dustin, thank you
Yeah.
so much, and hopefully we can talk again sometime.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, that'll be great. See ya.